Hi, I'm Tiana Shoei. I'm a writer, entrepreneur, leader, and energy. This is my podcast, Ain't Quite Right. Join me as we laugh, learn, and live big. Hello, everyone. Tiana here, and this is my podcast, Ain't Quite Right. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so excited to launch this podcast and share this time with you. So what to expect for today's podcast? I want to give you a brief introduction into who I am and why I started this podcast. We'll cover the topic of the day, and today's topic is morning routines. We'll do a quick summary at the end and an inspirational quote. I have a whole repertoire of quotes that I absolutely love that have been big in helping me achieve the things in my life that I'm aiming for, and I hope that they help inspire you as well. The reason I started this podcast is simple. I am absolutely passionate about seeing people thrive. I have had an interesting journey in life. I'm still young and still have a lot of life ahead of me, but my journey has taught me many lessons the good old-fashioned way. I jokingly tell people I am working towards my PhD from the School of Hard Knocks. I've been trying to get out at my master's degree, but as my stubborn ways would have it, I'm probably going to be getting my PhD in the School of Hard Knocks. But all kidding aside, you know, the world as I look around it today, we just have so much chaos, so much negativity. And I thought, you know what? I love being silly. I love having fun. That's why I say that let's laugh, learn, and live big together in my opening for this podcast, because that's really what I want to do. I want to hopefully give you some food for thought, some entertainment, and you know, just a different way of looking at things as they're a little bit crazy. Now, what should you expect from these podcasts going forward? Some guests. I've got some great guests lined up that I'm looking forward to joining me. I also have Jack Connolly, who did the first two podcasts with me. They were kind of our dry run, getting things started. And so I hope Jack joins me a good bit in the future. I've got some great friends and family that I'm looking forward to having join me on this podcast. So, you know, just again, hope to share with you inspirational stories and some great wisdom and insight that I have learned throughout the years, the good old-fashioned hard way. So today, I just wanted to, as I said, introduce myself and tell you a little bit about who I am and why I'm doing all of this. So my name's Tiana. I live in South Carolina. I'm originally from San Diego, California. So I grew up kind of an interesting childhood, spent up until the time I was 14 years old in California, and then moved to South Carolina when I was 14. I actually started high school here in South Carolina. It was quite a culture shock, and we'll talk about that in future episodes. But nonetheless, I have grown to fall in love with the South. I live on 10 acres, and the reason that my husband and I took on the endeavor to take over 10 acres is I'm also an entrepreneur. One of the businesses that I'm a part owner of is a bike shop, and my husband and I are passionate outdoor folks. We are mountain bikers, road bikers, runners, road runners, trail runners. We really love all things outdoors. So we were fortunate enough to find a 10-acre piece of property with a pond in the back. So we've got a little boat that we paddle on, go fishing. We've got trails that we've been hand cutting. There is nothing quite like taking this Californian and putting a chainsaw in her hands. I can wield a chainsaw and a weed eater. Skills I did not know I was going to have this lifetime, to be honest with you. So now we've got trails we can run and ride in our backyard. And we've been able to share those with friends and family as well. We're really excited to share our property to help other people enjoy and love nature as much as we do. Along the lines of being an entrepreneur, I have, the bike shop, and I also have a small consulting business that I do on the side from my day job, which is working as a director at a subrogation insurtech. So I have almost 20 years experience in the insurance industry. It's something I love very much, and I'm so fortunate to have such a great career in that. But I have been a serial entrepreneur my entire life, starting at 5 years old in Loma Linda, California. Started my first business, which was Wasp Busters, and I managed to scrounge up the neighborhood kids and steal some of my dad's garden tools. And we went door to door and sold the wasp nest removing service. And that was my first big lesson in capitalism. We charged 10 cents a nest. And after our first customer complained because we left squished wasp nests on her driveway, we upped our game to 25 cents if you wanted it removed off your driveway. From there, we moved to San Marcos, California, where myself, my sister, and my two great childhood girlfriends, Lauren and Shannon, we started pet care, and we had quite a little business running. I have to tell you, looking back now, I chuckle at myself that we ran such a successful little business. We had regular customers that used us to house sit while they went out of town. We had dogs we walked every day. We did pet grooming services. So we had quite a little robust business going, and I'll get to tell fun stories about Pet Care was the name of that business. And also did a couple little side things there as well. The first time, actually, I heard the word entrepreneur was one of the other businesses I started in San Marcos, which was I sold mistletoe door to door. So again, in my very industrious way, managed to scrounge up the neighborhood boys, get them to climb the trees, pick the mistletoe that grew naturally on the trees, and then I would clean it up and go door to door and sell it. And I remember one lady opened her door and she bought a bunch of mistletoe from me, and she looked at me and she said, "You're the little entrepreneur." And I remember going home, I don't know, I was about 12 years old, and going, "Mom, what's an entrepreneur?" I don't even think I could say the word properly. So I'm fortunate that I've been able to think outside of the box and kind of function outside of the box. And I'm going to talk about that journey a little bit because, again, in my love and in my desire to help people thrive, I really have learned to think outside of the box in terms of how to make a living, how to do things you love and are passionate about. I am a firm believer, and I will be as long as I live, that every single person on this planet has a unique purpose. And the reason that I can say that with a great deal of confidence is nobody else has your DNA. Nobody else looks like you, thinks like you, with the exception of twins. You might have somebody that looks like you, but thinks like you, has your fingerprints. You are 100% unique, which means that you bring a unique element to this planet. And I truly believe that our deepest contentment and fulfillment is found when we are living our purpose. And I'm going to go into this in future podcasts a lot more. That's not the topic of today's podcast. But when I say purpose, I believe purpose is doing something you're passionate about that adds value to other people. I believe we truly are only ever going to be whole and content people when we are adding value to the lives of those around us. So because I'm so passionate about people finding their purpose and living it out and truly living a life of thriving and contentment, that's why I'm excited to put this podcast together. So on that note, what led me here? Why am I doing a podcast? Why did I get here? I'll give you that quick history. So as I mentioned, I have about 20 years experience in the transportation insurance industry. I love it. I absolutely love insurance, and I'm so grateful for the many mentors I've had in the industry, the friends I've made, and I'm able to still do that as a career. But what led me to where I am today is a few years back, I was going through kind of a life crisis. And that began because one of the things you'll learn about me is I'm an absolute bookworm. I have been since I was a kid. And in fact, it is such a natural part of who I am. I never thought anything of it, to be honest with you. I have my nose in a book all the time. And I read about one book a week on average, just because it is my favorite pastime and hobby when I'm not running, writing, doing all the other crazy things I do. So I don't even think anything of it. And it wasn't actually until somebody brought to my attention, "You read a lot," that I went, how is that even strange? It's been such a normal part of my life. I never thought anything of it. But what I tend to do is pick a topic and kind of dive into it. So, the topics that I love run the gamut. I love history. I love health and nutrition. Being an athlete and somebody who is an avid advocate of taking care of your body, I have read all kinds of books on health and nutrition. I love fiction books. I'm a fantasy fiction nerd. I have several Lord of the Rings tattoos. I read all kinds of fantasy fiction, so I'll talk about some of that in future podcasts. So it really runs the gamut. I really don't have a topic that I won't find interesting at some point in time. But I got into a leadership and business strategy and business kick for a while. And listen, that again, when I talk about those topics, it's very broad. Everything from I've read boring accounting books because I want to understand the intricacies of accounting. I'm also a CPCU, and for those insurance friends of mine, you'll understand that CPCU is an advanced designation in the insurance industry. So I've had to learn everything about statutory accounting and generally accepted accounting principles. I've also studied business strategy, leadership, management. All of those things have really are topics I'm very passionate about. And the reason that I became so passionate about them is I learned a really important concept, and that is there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. And when I got into this deep leadership learning that I went on, I began to realize that there is a deficiency in the business world of valuing leadership for what it is. In other words, we tend to take leadership and turn it into a promotion that happens through your career. You fit the certain mold, you achieve certain successes, and so you get promoted to a leadership position. But then we kind of stop there. And it's a shame because it has come at the detriment of the business world. And so I'm going to talk in future podcasts a lot about this because it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, because leadership is a skill that should be developed like any other skill, but it is one that we rarely develop and value. And so as I dove into this leadership topic and really began to learn about it from a myriad of different perspectives. One of my favorites and somebody you'll hear me talk about a lot is Jocko Willink. In fact, in my unicorn mug today that I'm drinking some Jocko tea. Jocko has written several great books on leadership, and the first one that really resonated with me and kind of rocked my world was his book, Extreme Ownership. And so as I began to learn all this, I kind of took a step back and realized, oh my gosh, I've been thinking about my life upside down and backwards. As a career person, as a career businesswoman, I always saw my life in the progression of my leaders would determine my future. In other words, I would do a good job and be recognized by leadership and therefore become promoted. And while that is certainly the way that the business world works, when you take a step back and look at it less entrenched in the actual work, but from a more macro level, it's almost a hopeless feeling because you have to convince other people in your organization that you are worthwhile in order to be promoted. And I just realized that that is not at all really what I believe, and it's not at all the type of mentality that should be promulgated. We rather should think of promotion or think of our careers and think of our lives in terms of what I can do to move it forward. In other words, it's not about waiting for my boss to acknowledge me or recognize. It's who do I want to become? What do I want from my life? And then what do I have to do to achieve that? So it's a subtle difference in thinking. And as I went on that journey, I hired a coach. And the coach it was a life-changing experience. I cannot say enough good stuff about my coach. He truly is one of the most incredible people I've had the privilege of knowing, working with, and hopefully somebody I get to call friend the rest of my life. And working with a coach really helped me realize that I've been thinking too narrowly, and even somebody who grew up as an entrepreneur thinking so outside of the box, I had allowed just the culture and the way we think in the business world to box me in way too much. And I realized that I have so many things I'm passionate about, and I don't need to fit inside of a box. And so that's kind of what got me to the journey I am today. That's why I started my business, Curador, and why I'm on the journey I'm on. So with all that said, what really got me into the position I am now, where I've got my blog going, my business going, I've got my wonderful career at SubroSmart and all of these other things going. What really got me into that was one habit that I changed in my life that has set me up for success. And I wanted to start my podcast by talking about that habit because this is such an important thing to understand. And I'm going to close with a quote about habits, but I cannot stress it to you enough. If you do not pay attention to the habits you have in your life, then you are not paying attention to the direction your life is going in. And habits are so deeply ingrained into our neuroanatomy. And just to give you a basic introduction into some of the research I've done on habits. Again, this is another one of the topics that I've delved into as the bookworm that I am. But again, you have to just understand that our brains have evolved to create habit loops as often as possible, to leave the majority of our thinking open towards things that don't require repetition. So in other words, our brains have evolved to move things into what's called our basal ganglia, which is the part of our brain that stores habit loops. So that way we can then use our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that processes logic and learning and new information, to leave that open for new information, to let everything else just fit into our habit loop. And that activates what's called our reticular activation system, which is the part of your brain that filters information out so you can focus on what's new and different, and you don't focus on kind of the repetition or the things that, just you take for granted as a regular functioning human being. So all of that to say, habits define everything in our life. So the first habit that I had to change to really turn my life around and create a life for myself that was of my design, not of somebody else's design. This is really important to understand. Your life will become what somebody else designs if you don't intentionally design it yourself. Again, I let my bosses, I let my career, I let everything else in life determine what my life was going to be until I decided to take ownership of my life and turn it into exactly what I wanted. And you should do the same. You have a unique purpose, and I encourage you to take ownership of your life and begin to craft it into what you want. And I'm going to share all of the things I've learned about that, having a vision, understanding your values, creating habits that support that. That is going to be one of the overarching themes as we go through this podcast together. So the main habit that I had to change was my morning routine. This is something that we take so for granted in today's busy world. Now, thankfully, we're in the middle of COVID. I'm recording this on July 1st of 2020. And, COVID has caused everybody to kind of slow down. We've had a lot more work from home. I think things are now picking back up again. But in all of this, I hope everybody took some time to do some reflection and maybe tweak some things around the edges. Your morning habit should definitely be one of those. So let me just tell you about my morning habit, and then I'll tell you why this is important, and we'll go through some different suggestions for how you should create your own morning habit. Now, here's the thing I want to be painfully clear about. When it comes to talking about the things that I suggest, everything that I suggest is a principle or a concept. You have to find your own version of it. You are a unique person. You have a unique style, and I want to be careful. I'm cautious about sharing too much about my personal journey, only because I don't want to convolute your journey with mine. In other words, I want you to find your own path. So this is just my suggestion, but the idea is to put this into your mind so you can find your own version of this. So my morning routine looks like this. I get up and I walk my dog first thing. I learned that after reading a book on health and fitness. It's Yuri Elkam's The All-Day Fat Burning Diet. And he teaches you that when you get out and you get the sunlight in your eyes first thing in the morning, that helps to lower your melatonin, which is what puts you to sleep in your brain, and raise your cortisol levels. Now, cortisol, we hear is a dirty word because it is the stress hormone. But cortisol, again, is also what helps your brain wake up and function. So it's excessive cortisol levels that are dangerous. But get that sunlight in your eyes first thing. So I get out and I walk my dog first thing in the morning. After that, I make breakfast, and then I sit down and I have quiet time. This is so important. This is the part of my day where I set my intention for the day. I sit down, and because I'm a Christian, I read my Bible and I pray. And so if you don't have any faith, or if you're not a religious or spiritual person, you still should take time to do this. Sit down, meditate, think about your day. I meditate and I think about my day, what I want to achieve. I write it down. I have a journaling practice I go through. I'll share that journaling practice with you in another podcast. But I sit down and I'm intentional, and I decide what I want to get done for my day. And then once I have given myself and set intentionality for my day, then I go on. So often we get up, we start our routine, we eat breakfast, take our shower, do our thing, go. And we don't give ourselves any time to think. You will hear me talk about thinking time over and over again, because thinking time has been what has changed the game for me. And when you learn to implement thinking time in your own life, it will change the game for you as well. We are so busy as a society that we don't stop to think any longer, and it's so important. So my morning routine consists of making sure that I set aside an hour. Not everybody can do that, but again, and I love, this is a quote from Rachel Hollis: if you don't have an hour a day for yourself, then you aren't living. So make that hour. If that means going to bed an hour earlier so you can get up an hour earlier, turning off the TV for an hour. I'm a big advocate of turning off the TV. Whatever it takes to give yourself some time just to think. Give yourself permission to ask yourself what you want to accomplish that day, who you want to be, what are your biggest priorities. Just give yourself thinking time. So again, that is just, the biggest thing I would say is, if you want to start changing your life, or if you really want to start getting in touch with who you are and just questioning, is my life everything I want it to be? Am I achieving everything I want? Do I have peace in my life? Am I truly content? It starts with giving yourself enough time to stop and think. So just in recap, this is, I'm excited about this podcast. I have, put it together just to share with you guys fun, hope, inspiration. We'll tell some funny stories. I like to laugh. This has been a serious podcast. I promise I will not make it always this serious, but had a lot to cover in a short period of time. Just wanted to do an introduction with you. And just remind you, make some time to have an intentional morning routine. Do it. Make it a priority to give yourself some time. If all you have is 15-20 minutes, give yourself that 15-20 minutes. I promise you will not regret building that time for intentionality into your day. So in closing, I want to give you a quote that is so important to understand, and hopefully spend some time thinking about this quote as you go through your week. This is from E.M. Alexander. People do not decide their futures. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. Again, I kind of briefly touched on the topic of habit, but people do not decide their futures. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. Creating a habit of giving yourself time in the morning to be intentional about your day is a habit that will help you create the future that you want. Because I promise you, 10 years from now, you're going to look back and you're going to ask yourself, and you're going to either be celebrating and grateful for the intentionality that you created today, or you're going to regret the time that you wasted. And so again, our future is real. Today is real. So be intentional about who you are today, but set yourself up for success in 10 years from now. People do not decide their futures. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. Thank you guys for tuning in. Until next time, this is Tiana Shoei, Ain't Quite Right. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this content, please be sure to subscribe, follow, leave a review, and tell anybody else you think might enjoy joining us on this journey. Until next time.